Welcome to the FNO InsureTech Podcast, your home for all things InsureTech. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd, Rob Beller, and David Prejeant.
Hey, podcast world. We're here again. Welcome to another enchanting episode. That's right, enchanting, of FNO InsureTech, your multi-platinum award-winning podcast, the only one you listen to, of course, because you just don't have time after you listen to us. It just takes time to ingest it all and to let it all soak in. Isn't that right, David?
That is exactly right. I hadn't realized, I knew that we went platinum once. I failed to realize we had gone platinum on multiple occasions. I'm thrilled to learn that today. I'm going to add that feather to my proverbial podcast cap.
Well,
so that
I was talking to somebody just the other day about the fact that I do a podcast, and they laughed and laughed, and they thought that that was so funny. And then they asked me, what is it about? And I said, it's about insurance technology and insurance technology companies. And they laughed and laughed and laughed. And then I got out my multi-platinum awards and showed them to them, and they stopped laughing.
And then they stopped laughing, of course, and just begin to revel.
That's right.
At the
That's right.
glory of your multi-platinum awards. Yeah.
We should address, there is another multi-platinum winner here, and that's Lee Boyd, who once again is not with us.
No, I believe he's globetrotting. He's off seeing the world for work or something, I believe. I don't know. There's no telling with him.
What the heck, Lee Boyd? This is your old friend, Rob Beller, and your not quite as old friend, David Prejeant, saying to you, are we ever going to see you again? Where are you? And I know that all of you listeners out there are thinking, why isn't Lee on anymore? Well, let me tell you why. He had a better offer.
Rob, funny thing is, yes, he did get a better offer, but I've actually, I don't know if you know this or not, but our amazing producer, Israel, started routing all of our fan mail to my address.
Oh, wow.
So I've been getting all of that.
Cool.
And I'm just going to tell you, the fan mail requests for Lee Boyd, they're starting to stack up. They're really piling up.
For his autographed picture.
Yeah. You know, he does such a good job with the fans.
He does.
You know, I'm pretty sure he puts a little spritz of cologne and gets a nice felt tip marker and autographs those, each one by hand.
The fans love him.
He sends them out.
The fans love him. And we all love him.
They do.
Speaking of love, we have a podcast today.
Yes.
That turned out to be super interesting and super informative.
Absolutely.
About a piece of the insurance landscape that I, speak for myself, didn't know a heck of a lot about. And that is risk management and risk management information systems, or as it's known in the business, RMIS, something like that. Risk management information systems. And what it is the technology that supports and underlies risk management, which is a pretty tough field out there. And we have with us today one of the founders of Aclaimant with us today. David Wald is on the podcast.
David was super interesting, very generous to give us some of his time and educate us. Rob and I, we're claims people oftentimes, we're technology people oftentimes, but risk management is not where we hang our hats. So David was nice enough to give us an education in the risk management world.
And he's going to do the same for you too when you listen to this. And I just want to say, before we get started, David is a great podcast guest. So if you like a good interviewee, we know you like good interviewers because you're listening to David and I, but if you like to hear what a good interviewee is like, listen to this. So without further ado,
absolutely,
here is our interview with David Wald, the president and co-founder of Aclaimant. Hey, everybody. We are here with our guest today from where, David?
Chicago.
From beautiful Chicago, Illinois, which you can say about it in the summertime. And we have David, who's currently the president and co-founder of Aclaimant. And we're excited to have David on today because we're going to cover a section of the insurance marketplace and value chain that we don't often get to spend much time in. And so we're excited about that. Welcome to FNO InsureTech.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So where in Chicago are you? Tell us.
Our office is at River North. I live in Lincoln Park, but downtown, it's fun down here. It's hot in the summer, cold in the winter, but it's a great city. I wouldn't live anywhere else.
Do you take in a Cubs game?
So I hate to say this, I'm originally from Michigan. So I have like Detroit pulsing through my blood at all times. So Tigers, Lions, Pistons, I will go reluctantly to the Cubs games. They're great, but I know where my loyalties lie.
But it's not the same.
Not the same.
It's not the same. It's a port in a storm.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's jump right in and talk about Aclaimant. Let's start by kind of level setting for our audience. Tell us what Aclaimant is, what you guys do and who you serve, and what it is that you do there.
Rob, super excited to be here, and thanks for having me, David. Awesome to kind of meet you guys both. So Aclaimant is a company that is designed to help companies effectively become better at risk management. We exist in a category of software called RMIS, Risk Management Information Systems. They're primarily designed to help businesses better track everything relating to risk in their business. So claims, policies, safety, compliance, exposures, assets, effectively becoming the one-stop shop for a risk manager to make their lives easier and therefore to enable their company to be safer, to be more cost-effective, to be more compliant, and ultimately to spend more time focusing on their core mission. We primarily do this for companies that are in the middle market and small enterprise segment. So if you've been around at all, there's a couple of companies that serve and have been RMIS companies for a long time who primarily serve very large organizations. We found that RMIS as a category is a great concept. The idea you can build a software package and technology with AI to help companies become safer is a great mission. But it was missing for companies that weren't as large as Target and Amazon and Walmart. And that's really where we felt there was a ton of companies that had great goals, were growing very quickly, but just needed a way to help their risk team, help keep their businesses safe in order to become better at what they want to do ultimately, which isn't focus on managing claims and managing risk.
When David and I were discussing this in preparation, we talked about, enormous multi-location, large employee count organizations that are probably just the target for you guys. And if you could explain to our audience, why is that? What kind of dig into risk management for a minute?
For sure. So risk management is kind of one of those things that every business has to deal with eventually. It kind of feels it's like a slow leak in your basement if you're trying to add an extension onto your house, for lack of a better analogy, right? It starts off, it's fine. You add one room, it's not a big deal. Then all of a sudden the foundation goes out. You want to add something else, and then all of a sudden the lighting goes out. And then eventually you kind of can't build off of a foundation that's not stable. Not the greatest analogy, but the way that businesses tend to grow is over time, every business has things that go wrong as they grow. If you're in manufacturing, people get hurt, machines break. If you're in construction, you have equipment or things that go wrong. You have issues with your subs. If you're in a restaurant, right, you'll have customers who eventually get hurt or sue you just because of the nature of what happens and people or things are in motion. Over time, this adds up to claims. And as you have more claims, that's why you buy insurance. However, after a certain point in time, just buying insurance is no longer cost effective because left unmanaged, there's fraud, there's waste, there's renewals that can get crushed if you aren't looking at what you're doing. So over time, as companies become bigger and as they grow, they eventually hire a person whose job it is to keep the claims volume intact, keep the premiums kind of all organized and smooth. And then eventually that person does a bunch of things to both stay compliant, to be safer, to manage costs, and ultimately to help make sure that the cost of insurance and the cost of risk in a business is growing at the appropriate rate as opposed to escalating and eating into companies' profitability.
So that yields, I'm guessing, a ton of data.
Ton of data.
And you guys do what with that?
Yeah. So we do a couple things. So the first thing is, and I'm sure anyone who's been around this insurance space knows, data quality in this space is lacking, to put it nicely. Risk managers are in the job of basically having to say, I need to make sure nothing goes wrong and deal with anything that does. And that's a pretty big task for a pretty small department. And the way they're able to do this is primarily, as you're talking about, by tackling data, both reactive and proactive data sources, to understand both where I have exposure in the business. So do I have 10,000 vehicles out in California or 5,000 in New York? Do I have properties and exposures that could be affected by a storm? Do I have large employee populations that are doing dangerous work? Or am I staffing at third-party employers who have less than ideal work sites? So a lot of what we're doing is helping companies to both understand the exposures that they have, understand the things that go wrong, what are the accidents, what are the near misses, what are the claims they have, and then be able to monitor those claims over time so they can actually make sure they can both see what's gone wrong so they can make it go right, understand what could go wrong so they can prevent it, understand what is going wrong right now in order to help make sure they can actively triage those things. And those are kind of the three components of kind of what typically risk managers work through to try to manage costs in an environment like that.
So like your analogy that you had before about the house.
Yep.
I mean, when it's just a house, it's kind of all easy to keep track of, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of the person that maybe runs facilities can also kind of keep track of that, right? The person that's taking care of the house. But once the house becomes part of a 1,000-unit complex, you may be having repetitive situations all throughout the complex that are particularly problematic. And that's a lot of, I'm guessing what your product does is constantly identifying and tracking those things so that they can fix them.
Exactly. So very simply, absolutely. So the more detailed kind of response there is there's a couple of different things that these technology packages really designed to do. The first is maybe the most obvious, which is just make sure people do the right things every time something goes wrong, right? I have a series of vendors that we should use and I pay them because they help make things go better. There's a number of best practices I'm required to follow depending on what state I am so I don't get sued or I don't break the law, et cetera. And there's a number of data points I want to have so I can actually plug things into models to figure out like what's actually going to bite me later on. And so I think as you start to look at these different items, I think it's very interesting to kind of see what happens along the way. And then with obviously the advent and the kind of additional opportunities that are available with AI now, you can not only make the repetitive tasks easier, you can automate them much more effectively. And predictive modeling has been a huge part of, risk and claims for a long time. But combining predictive risk and claims models with automation from AI and then a workflow automation platform means you can both do those same couple of things where I can figure out how to make sure everything is going right every step along the way. And when it's not, intervene as early as possible to prevent a small leak from becoming a big leak or a small injury from becoming a catastrophic one.
That makes a lot of sense, David. And as you guys are putting all this information together and plugging in these new AI tools, my thinking was, let's say we own 17 restaurants and, maybe we have different people that manage risks at different locations, or maybe one guy who's like a regional guy, but of course he's super busy, right? He doesn't have time to really look at every claim that's filed at every restaurant, but people keep slipping in the freezer. Maybe there's a bigger problem there, right? Is that kind of something that you guys would be able to snatch up and say, hey, look, guys, you need to look closer at this?
Absolutely, right? So there's kind of a couple of different ways that people tend to like utilizing our data and information, right? And so there's kind of two different categories of kind of cost savings or of improvement opportunities we look at. There's like the tactical, which is, hey, if there's an employee who gets injured, like, is there a witness? Did they go to the emergency room or did you get them over to an urgent care facility? And like, do they have a return to work date? Like simple things that are very tactical and practical, which you can do all the time. The second thing here, and a lot of the reasons companies come to us is because their data is in 13 different systems. It's in 2 different regional managers' heads, in 6 different store owners' heads. And they're trying to answer the question of like, why the heck is our claims volume up 50%? Like, do we have a bad manager in the night shift in Ohio, right? Do we have like a wet floor issue out in, to your point, in these 2 restaurants? And so identifying both the trending to figure out where there's issues, the ability to go ahead and drill in. And now with kind of some of our predictive modeling, the ability to go and query the data, we actually can have reports run that pull out insights and actually identify and flag anomalies. Like, hey, did you know that between 2023 and 2025, you had a 75% spike in indemnity claims in these 3 areas? Or you have 10 claims that all have exactly the same incurred value, which is not like impossible, but also highly unlikely. Or John Smith had 42 claims last year. So a lot of this is exactly those things. You're trying to figure out both, if you get the data in a nice organized fashion, you can go ahead and identify where you can go ahead digging, go ahead and find the solutions. And then even the best part is with our kind of proactive modules, actually put scheduled tasks and repetitive opportunities in place and say like, hey, do the opening checklist in the morning, make sure the freezer is dry. Or like, hey, you probably got to put this guy in a pit and go ahead and make sure someone's actually managing the follow-up here to get him either coached the right way or coached out.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, we live in this AI world now, right? We all know it's not going anywhere. You guys have been in business for 10 years, I think I saw when I was looking at this. How do these AI models speed up what you're doing, slow down what you're doing? I mean, they must have a major effect on the things you guys have been working on and what it looks like now versus maybe even what it looked like 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what's been awesome in this space is we kind of stepped in thinking that there's an opportunity here because in our view, and the category has existed for 20 years. We didn't invent the category, but we always felt like it was too slow and too big for kind of most of the modern companies that were out there who are nimble and want to move fast. So we always built this idea that like speed kills, either can kill you or it can help you kind of kill the competition respectfully. And that's kind of why we've kind of focused on where we were. And so back in we've been doing predictive modeling, and kind of machine learning for, 7 or 8 years at this point in time. That was kind of always our first movement in this space. We've been kind of doing, OCR and kind of like always kind of on the bleeding edge of where AI was going. And so when the models came out, a lot of what we saw the opportunity was to do was kind of take the things that we have been like itching at and working on and really kind of applying them both to drive insights for our customers. But a lot of where we're finding opportunities is the setup of this kind of information, the cleaning of data, the creating of workflows, the identifying and understanding API connectivity between different systems. A lot of that is highly repetitive and rules-based. And so what's been amazing to see is that we kind of built the chassis over the past 10 years, or actually rebuilt it 2 times to kind of help make it better and faster. And then what's now been really fun is that with these tools, we're actually able to put a jetpack on the back of it. And we have agentic solutions that we're both piloting and actively using here to do a lot of the work that would take the team 3 weeks that can now get done in 3 minutes. So we're able to drive value for our customers faster. We're able to go ahead and find ways to drive insights faster. And ultimately, our goal is to really help kind of have RMIS keep up with the pace of business and push the pace of business because everyone has to move faster. So we have to move faster right along with them.
Absolutely. Has there ever been like a specific use case or anything where you guys have been using your models and going through data and really just kind of found something that was interesting, surprising, you didn't expect, or maybe even that a customer didn't expect that you guys brought back to them and said, hey, we probably weren't expecting this, but here's some interesting information that we really think you should have?
Absolutely. So one of, and again, there's every customer we always find like out of the gate, there's 1 or 2 things and we get their data in the system and look at it and they're like, that's wrong. And we're like, no, that's your data. And they're like, oh my God, this is it? I actually have a really interesting kind of one, which, we had a large client who was using a TPA, great relationship with their TPA. But I think on like day 5 after going live, they looked around our system and they were saying, hey, like, why do we have so many indemnity claims? And we're like, well, so many indemnity claims, like, but they think the ratio seems really high. I'm like, I would agree. And they dug in. And what they realized was that the system setup they were using previously was coding all of their claims wrong on the way over to the TPA. And so they were getting billed out of the gate for indemnity adjusters who, as you guys know, cost more and then work a little, again, they work harder, but for things that were report only or med only. And so they were like, hey, let's go ahead and fix this up. And all of a sudden, the TPA bill dropped pretty substantially the next month. And again, it was again, that's just like low hanging dollars on the table, but was an interesting opportunity. They just looked around, they were like, oh my God, 2 clicks, boom, easy and done.
Where does your product sit inside of an organization? Is it in a risk management office?
Yes, with the asterisk that the risk management office is a little amorphous inside of these organizations. So depending upon an org sophistication, we find that some orgs that are very forward-leaning, like have a risk manager, a chief risk officer, but a lot of times risk will live, depending upon where it grew up, sometime between finance, operations, and HR, and occasionally under legal. And so we typically will be serving primarily the risk leader. However, that person may be serving a different part of the organization or a larger part of the organization inside of that kind of purview.
Does your platform sit by itself, or is it integrated with larger products that these large organizations might be using, for other things? I would think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, highly integrated. Back to our earlier kind of question about the data. So one of the things that we as a product do really well, centralize, organize, and streamline data specifically for the risk management team. So we capture data from a variety of sources, but even today, we're like natively integrated with things you would expect, payroll solutions, applicant tracking systems, construction management, things like Procore and Bullhorn, Ultimate Kronos Group, and ADP and Bamboo HR. We're rolling out telematics here and telematics integrations very shortly. And then for a number of our customers, we're also syncing with things like location, information about staffing and hours and kind of actual like wages, and then kind of information about like buildings and properties and equipment as well. Again, the beauty of risk is that you can never have too many data points to try to predict what's going to happen in the future and understand where you have an unknown ticking time bomb that's kind of waiting to go off that you can hopefully get in front of and diffuse.
Keep talking about prediction. That's a big part of this, correct? Is
yeah.
What can I expect is going to happen, next month, next year, what have you?
Yeah, exactly. So again, the name of the game in risk, right, is both it's why you buy insurance, because you think you're going to have X many claims next year because you had X many claims last year, and this is your trend and this is your mod. But a lot of where I think we help companies to focus is both to like see the trend, understand what the activities they're doing are actually having on these trends. So are you able to see your reserves going down? Are you able to go ahead and understand that you're driving frequency down? We kind of give people scoring on claims to understand like what is the 90th percentile versus the 10th percentile of a claim like this, which is a bee sting to a 50-year-old man in the Midwest who's working in a manufacturing facility. And understanding like, hey, you're doing a good job of getting these claims closed, or hey, you're actually kind of behind the 8 ball here. So a lot of where we help people to do is both predict, benchmark, and then also understand the impact of the work they're doing here. Ultimately, to try to go ahead and drive all these things kind of together.
Let's talk just for a quick minute about workers' comp.
Let's do it.
So please jump right in. Tell us how Aclaimant and workers' comp go together.
Peanut butter and jelly, just like that.
You count the ways.
So it's not the only reason, but the primary reason we find companies engaging with us is typically due to pain related to workers' comp, like no pun intended. So workers' comp, right? Workplace injuries, accident, illnesses. It's kind of a multifaceted problem, and it's directly related to headcount. The more people I have in more high risk exposures, the more they're going to get injured, the more things that are going to go wrong. And as companies scale, it's the most natural thing that becomes problematic. And so we kind of find typically that like that's kind of the breaking point, because it's a high frequency type of claim that eventually the number of claims that are required there and the number of people that it touches, right? So you have the employee, the supervisor, the return to work schedule, potentially a doctor, a lawyer. You have OSHA and a couple different OSHAs in the state. You have different state kind of FNOLs you have to go ahead and deal with, different carriers, you might be self-insured in some places, on and on. So when you add the matrix of all these things together, it creates this administrative nightmare where every misstep not only costs you time, but can actually exacerbate the claim and cost you money as well. And so that, as you're going to think through, is where a system actually helps to organize all the rules, organize all the data, drive you to the right next decision, and make sure nothing falls through the cracks. You have that transparency you need to really try to optimize this process and reduce the burden of both time and money on a business.
So to kind of tie all this together, what was it that was broken in the market that led to the creation of Aclaimant?
So I would love to take all the credit for it, but unfortunately it was not my initial idea. So the initial founding, so there was kind of three founders to begin with. One is actually now my father-in-law. He was not when we started the business. That's a story we can kind of talk about later, but he was a lifer in kind of the insurance space. Was running a work comp captive in the staffing industry. And what he found was that everybody that was kind of participating in his captive had just a miserable time reporting and understanding claims. And at a certain point in time, there was, taking Ubers home on his phone, but to bust the fax machine out in order to get a claim filed with his TPA. And kind of had this moment where it's like, this is dumb. Like, why is this the way it is? And as we asked around, the response that came around the space was like, oh, it's just the way it is. We didn't accept that. And the rest was history.
What about your own journey? I mean, were you born a risk manager or what happened?
Well, backwards, sideways, and upside down into it. So I was very fortunate out of college to end up in Chicago at a venture capital firm called Lightbank. It was the Groupon Founders venture fund. One of the earliest companies I participated with was a group called Snapsheet. At the time, they were Body Shop Bids. They eventually became Snapsheet, but they're, I think, one of the leaders. Exactly, you got the swag. But they were kind of, one of the early pioneers in the space. And so that was kind of my first kind of feel and flavor for like insurance and InsureTech. And then fast forward a few years, a family friend who had some experience in the space approached me, kind of knowing that I was a tech guy in the VC world and had this idea for this company. At the time, the basic premise was very simple. It was like, hey, we should build an app that makes it easy for companies to report so that a lawyer doesn't hear about it or an ambulance kind of chasing firm doesn't find out about it first. And so this company ended up being this just like never ending series of like perfectly timed steps where we built this product in 6 months. We managed to get in front of 3 groups we had no business talking to. I think it was the Navy, CNA, and Kelly Services. Oh, and we go and present them this 6-month project. And of course, I'm like Mr. Know-It-All from the VC world. I'm like, they're going to laugh us out of the room. And we show them this app that literally was a button that said report an incident. This is 2015, 14 or so. And the response to all 3 was, oh my God, that's brilliant. We should buy this. And my head literally exploded on the spot. And we ended up in procurement with all 3 groups, became customers and partners. But it was just one of those moments where like I've never had a light bulb moment where I'm like, oh my God, this space is in such desperate need of a solution like this. I never set out to be like, I'm going to be an InsureTech guy. I didn't even know that what an InsureTech was prior to my time there, but it's been an amazing journey.
You didn't even realize how bad it was.
No idea. No idea. But it's great. I mean, it's a space that's full of complication. And it's also one of those weird spaces where everybody looks at InsureTech and says InsureTech is a thing. InsureTech is so many things. And I think it's one of the things I always find so amazing that you have every different kind of company under the sun, but for some reason they all get bucketed as InsureTech because I think people outside the space don't really understand them. And it's easy to be like, you guys are all InsureTech. And we're like, well, you have carriers and you have brokers and you have MGAs and you have service providers and you have companies that do technology and predictive modeling stuff. And it's kind of all this stuff, but it's all grouped together into this one space.
We definitely have seen the insurance industry take its time adopting technology. That's starting to speed up, but traditionally it does not have a track record for fast implementation of new technology. So your button to them was amazing. It was an outstanding suggestion. I've heard that there was a transition for you in 2024 from founder and CEO. I mean, obviously you'll always be a founder to president. I always think that's interesting when leadership makes decisions like that. Could you walk us through what that looks like for you and from a leadership standpoint, just how does that reflect your leadership and the company's leadership in general? Absolutely. I think it's kind of like when you get number 1 draft pick and you're like, all right, how do we trade for the number 1 draft pick? It's kind of like the headline. But if you go back in time, when I first started this business, actually courtesy of Matt Streisfeld, who's over at Oak, I got introduced super early at one of the early InsureTech Connects to Kathy Burns. Kathy, at the time, had just finished building Ventive inside of Aon and spun it out. And it's a similar business to ours, but just grown to a massive scale, had a great transaction. At the time, we were way too early, but I met Kathy. It's like, oh my God, you built this business before. You built it for enterprise. You're building it for middle market. Like, let's stay in touch.
And she was like, okay, cool. Made a couple great introductions and we kind of touched over time. When our Series B happened, went back to Kathy and said, hey, like we need an independent board member. I can't think of anybody better than you who would be able to opine and give us the opinion of like, I've made these mistakes, don't make them. Or like, you should go over here because enterprise is going the same path. Sorry, middle market's going the same path as enterprise, probably just 10 or 15 years later. And then after she was the digital officer at Ryan Specialty, after Ryan went public, she was trying to figure out what was going to happen next. We had kind of a great working relationship here. And so we kind of sat down and had like a really interesting chat. And I was like, hey, before you go do something else, like, do you want to see if we could work together here? And we kind of sat down and talked about it. And like, it didn't make sense to try to see if I could have her hop in and kind of like report up to me, et cetera. And so we kind of came to the conclusion, which was, Kathy as a leader has seen this kind of play out before. We work really well together. We even tried for 6 months part-time to figure out if it was a good relationship. And we kind of found a way where, our skill sets are so opposite that they complement very well. And so we were able to kind of basically almost divide up the baby of the business and figure out like, I'm great at these things, I'll sit over here. She's great at those things, she'll kind of work over there. We overlap at some critical areas, but the combination I think has been really helpful and really healthy for the business and kind of has been one of the things I probably didn't plan on, but definitely a very helpful and healthy chapter in our business.
Is AI behind that transition at all? The movement towards it? I'm sure your guys' usage of it, did it make sense in that regard?
Yeah, so I think it wasn't part of the calculus for the leadership change, but it did become an opportunity that we were able to take a lot more advantage of because we're able to kind of find more time to focus on the things that matter. So if you can even selfish think about it from my perspective, running the business, dealing with the teams, managing the board, kind of like all the other things, having Kath in there to help was able to gave me more time to focus on leaning in more on like, where can we go with AI? Like, where can we focus on new technology? How can we build out product? Where is there an opportunity in both go to market with our current customers to be able to kind of help? And even having another leader up at the top allowed us to kind of have more productive conversations of figuring out like, hey, these 3 things, probably there's no juice there. It's not worth the squeeze, but we should really be looking at these couple of areas as a way for us to lean in and kind of find ways to go ahead and work. So it ended up being a very fortuitously timed kind of move that let us both have more time to lean in and figure out, hey, the world's changing. How can we get in front of it? And you kind of leverage this kind of great opportunity that probably we'll never see again.
Yeah. I would think that, on a C level, that the timing, the pertinence of AI to your particular product, the timing of things and how quickly it's ended up moving, it all seems quite fortuitous.
This business has seemed like quite fortuitous at every step of the way, but I completely agree. It's kind of one of those things where if I look back to draw the lines here, I think our very first investor, it was one of my dad's college roommates at our wedding who we just kind of randomly talked to. And he, after the kind of wedding, gave me a call and was like, hey, I'm going to invest. I'm like, in what? He's like, in your business. I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to do this thing. All the way to now, we're like, we made this move. And then next thing we know, great tech's coming out and we actually have time and capacity and the thoughtfulness to be able to go ahead and approach and attack it. So I completely agree. And I think sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you're good. Hopefully, if you do it right, you can kind of get both.
Absolutely. David, what do you believe that the future of not just Aclaimant, but also just risk technology in general? We're moving so much faster than we used to. What does the future look like? What is the next, I would normally say 3 years, but it's almost impossible to predict that anymore. What does the future of this look like for Aclaimant and for RiskTech in general?
I think it's a great question and one that we obviously talk about all the time. I think there's a couple of things that I think are for certain. One is that everything's going to keep changing. It feels like the pace of change has ramped up. And I think we started to really feel it around COVID, where I think someone had a joke where like black swans used to be a thing that you like put in the board for like maybe happen. And now black swans are a thing you plan for to figure out which one's going to happen this year or in these 6 months, whether it's a war, whether it's a tariff, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's like regime changes or new technologies that are super disruptive, or it's all the stuff that happens all the time. And I don't see any reason why it would slow down. I think one of the things that AI is enabling, and maybe it's just a symptom, and not even just the cause, is just things can move faster. New businesses can start at a much more rapid pace. There's kind of new opportunities and new challenges. What I think is going to continue to happen from our perspective is that the need for risk management is going to probably go through the roof. Risk management is obviously fundamentally the thing you do when things change. And the faster that things change, the more uncertainty there is. And the more uncertainty there is, the more risk is in your business. And as we kind of enter what we believe is going to be a messy middle, where you have both people driving trucks and autonomous trucks, and you have vendors that are now like using AI solutions and vendors that are not, and you're putting this up in your job. We have a period here where like every adoption cycle for technology I've ever seen is, it's 10 or 15 years from like .com to internet to mobile to now everyone has a smartphone. And I don't think this is going to be any different because humans just have natural adoption cycles that will happen. And so you have some people who are super far ahead and some who are super far behind. But I think when you add all of these things together, what we know for certain is that like risk management is going to have to do probably 10 times more than it ever did, which also means that the counterpoint is that RiskTech is now going to have to become this very like cyborg type combination where you can have ultimate data at your fingertips, where you can really have insights being flagged for you, where you still have those people who are there helping to go ahead and try to drive better outcomes and make good decisions every step of the way to keep these businesses from blowing themselves up, which is going to become easier and easier if you don't have a good risk manager to help you along the way.
Risk is cost, right? Risk is money. And the cost, why are premiums rising the way that they are? Because claims are so much more expensive. There's like no choice here because it can drive you literally out of business.
Absolutely. And we're finding that, both the pace of change and also the regulatory environment. We're like the things that we hear about from our clients, and it's sometimes things I wish I didn't know, just because, there's like this corporate veil, like you go to a theme park and you're like, I love theme parks. And then you work with them as a client and you're like, oh my God, what happened? But I think that you're right. We kind of hear the pacing of things happening and how fast companies are having to go ahead and react. And even, there's like probably the most relatable example is, home insurance in like Florida, where you have people who just pull out of the market, or California, where you can't even insure your home anymore because nobody wants that risk. And so that's happening to businesses now as well, where like, depending upon how the regulatory environment changes, depending upon what can happen, and also just depending upon how fast the world changes here. If you have, like crazy flyers in California every handful of years, and you have a business that owns property in California, all of a sudden, this is like a meaningful part of your business strategy, is saying like, can I profitably operate in California? Or like, even if I can make money on a per store or per unit basis, eventually, will I just end up having to keep like rebuilding my stores every 4 years? Like I can't even afford to be in business here. So you're absolutely right that like risk is like this kind of amorphous thing, but it's ultimately it's claims, it's premiums, it's cost, and it hits EBITDA. And for any business out there that's not thinking about it that way, right? It's not just a cost of that you kind of have to eat. It's like it's an opportunity either to do better or to kind of get sucked down the vortex of the unknown.
Right. Well, gosh, just like that, we've run through our time. I haven't even gotten to all the questions on my list.
Maybe we get to hear the story about your father-in-law and how that started. We'll have to circle back to that.
We have time for that. I think we have to help this guy out with his father-in-law. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, I will say we have a great relationship. We talk every day. But no, the full story is I was dating my now wife, my then girlfriend in Chicago, and a family friend I've been known for a while. And one day her dad's in town, and her dad is like a wonderful guy. But if you can imagine, he's like a short little guy from Detroit who at 70 still plays hockey 2 nights a week with 30-year-olds. Cool. So he's rough and tumble in the best possible way. So one night we're talking and he's like, hey, I have this idea for an app. And I was like, okay, like I'm in a venture fund. Like I hear Apple ideas all the time. I'm like, yeah, that's great. But like, I'm good. No, thank you. I don't want to make business and pleasure. And he's like, okay. So next thing I know, he comes back. He's like, hey, I got 3 quotes to go ahead and build this app from dev shops in Chicago. What do you think? And I was like, oh, I can't dev shops in Chicago are crazy expensive. Like I can't have that in my conscience where like this guy who's maybe part of my life is like, has to eat this. I'm like, okay, I know somebody who can build this for you. 60 days, no problem. We'll get it done. Joel, our CTO, myself and Mike. And so like they meet We kind of start building. I sit in the middle to make sure that one of my very good friends and also my, girlfriend's dad don't kill each other. And, next thing we know, we're going and we're jamming and we're like, oh my God, there's something that's real here. And we just keep going and the rest is history. And there's a much probably funnier version of that over drinks, but that's probably like as deep as we can get on a podcast that's going to the masses.
Well, all the podcast listeners will have to track you down in real life. Not really, guys. Don't do that. I'm joking. But if you do happen across David in real life, buy him a drink and ask him to expand on that story. So, Rob, I know you said we're out of time, and then I, of course, didn't respect your time, Rob. So.
No, that's fine. I don't have anything else to do. I'm retired. So, this is great. It fills my time. Thank you. No, but what a pleasure to have you. It was fascinating to learn more about the business, your business, and the area that you guys function in. I think it's fascinating and dynamic, right? Not boring at all. Once again, here we are, 3 insurance guys, and we've all probably been in it long enough to know that insurance used to be boring, right? And now it's like cool.
It is cool.
It's cool.
Insurance is cool.
And as we know, the world couldn't go around without it, right?
True.
And so, we're thrilled to have the opportunity to look at your corner of it. Thanks for being here, and please do come back again.
No, it's been great. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, David.
What an interesting thing. Just when I think that there's not much new to learn in this crazy industry, there's new stuff to learn.
David was fantastic, and not just because he and I have the same first name, gave us some great information about his company, told us some super interesting stories, both on and off the air. And so we appreciate his time. And also, Rob, just the way he was able to articulate his stories, just really insightful and interesting.
That's the word. And for all of you people out there who are thinking, I should be a guest on their podcast, we're entirely, totally open to that. But I want you to re-listen to David's episode, because that's how you do it.
Yep.
He was a great guest and a great company. And we talked about it in some more detail offline, a fascinating company that's done really well. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our production team of Israel, who sometimes can get us started on time, Israel, and Lee Boyd, who's just too busy.
He's not here. He's globe-trotting or something. I don't know what he's doing.
He's too busy. Yeah, whatever. Who can keep up? And most especially to you, thank you very much. And until next time, goodbye, everybody.
The FNO InsureTech Podcast is produced by Alacrity Solutions. Thanks for listening.